There's no safe like Simply Safe.
Air Comfort Service, heating, cooling, and insulation. Weather.
Keeping the weather great across St. Louis on this Wednesday afternoon. Sunny skies, 85. Beautiful evening. Partly cloudy skies overnight, 58. Thursday, a little cool front comes through, a dry front first thing in the morning. Sunny and cooler Thursday, but a beautiful day. 79 degrees Friday, sunny and 79. Saturday, sunny and 82. Not bad at all for this time of year. This is 97.1 FM Talk Chief Meteorologist Dave Murray.
Hey, it's Annie, and I want to talk to you about the great savings that you can get at Ruler Foods. If you're looking for the ad or if you're looking for the Ruler Foods closest to you, you can put the zip code in at rulerfoods.com. Let's talk about the savings for Memorial Day that you can experience when you do your grocery shopping at Ruler Foods. They have 2-pound strawberries, $2.97. They have Kroger 73% lean ground beef. It's sold in a 3-pound roll. You can get that right now for $2.29 a pound. How about Kroger butter? $2.99. And that Kroger Deluxe ice cream, which is delicious. I highly encourage you to get that. We had some from my daughter's birthday party this past weekend. 2 for $4. Saving money at Ruler Foods is simple, and you can get great deals at Ruler Foods for all of your cookout needs this weekend while you're celebrating Memorial Day with friends and family. Fire up your grill with great deals at Ruler Foods. They also have patio furniture, grills, yard decor, and more. Find the Ruler Foods located closest to you at rulerfoods.com.
McKelvey Homes was founded in 1898. This year, we are celebrating our 125th anniversary by giving $12,500 of free options on all homes sold through the end of June. And we will also make a donation of $1,898 to the Independence Center for every home sold. Visit McKelveyHomes.com for our current locations and to learn more information about McKelvey Homes. That's McKelveyHomes.com.
If you're hiring, it can feel like you're trying to find a needle in a haystack. You can hope the right person comes along, or you can just use ZipRecruiter. And now you can try it for free at ZipRecruiter.com/radio. In fact, ZipRecruiter has helped a lot of business owners find their needle in a haystack, like Marco, president of operations at Telly Tires and Auto Centers. Because Telly Tires has grown a lot in the last few years, Marco needed to hire everyone from a receptionist to a store manager to a head mechanic.
ZipRecruiter helps me find all the right people, even the most difficult jobs to fill. ZipRecruiter helps me keep my business running.
Take it from Marco and millions of other businesses who've used ZipRecruiter. ZipRecruiter can help you find the needle in the haystack.
See why 4 out of 5 employers who post a job on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate within the first day. And right now, you can try ZipRecruiter for free. That's right, free at ZipRecruiter.com/radio. That's ZipRecruiter.com/RADIO. ZipRecruiter.com/radio. ZipRecruiter, the smartest way to hire.
There are over 10,000 reasons why steel is not sold at Lowe's or the Home Depot. Find tools for the job site or your own backyard at over 10,000 authorized local steel dealers. Find yours at steelusa.com. Lowe's and the Home Depot are trademarks of their respective companies.
Mark Cox here. If you're nearing retirement or already retired, call my friends Thomas Helbig and Bob Kershaw with the Retirement Advisory Group. They'll show you how to link to the market without the risk. They're the official financial advisors of my show. Go online to retirementkey.com.
That is exactly what I needed to hear.
Thank God someone here knows what they're talking about.
That's us. That's right. Gotta love this American ride.
Right, you need to take the time and get the full picture.
Come on, turn the radio on. It's Saturday and I won't be long.
Don't get me wrong, I love the ladies. I mean, they rev my engine, but they don't belong in the newsroom. It is Anchor Man, not Anchor Lady.
What do you want from me? I'm not America's sweetheart.
Goodness sake, kid. Keep your voice down. Your father's listening to the radio.
I'm not America's sweetheart.
This is the Annie Frey Show.
Well, hello there, and welcome to the Annie Frey Show. This is Ryan Wiggins, and Brad Range and Hannah Gibbs are all in studio with me. It's the Sans Annie Frey Show, but it's kind of a weird one because she actually will be here today. She just had a conflict for this first hour. So we've known this for a long time. We're just going to take over the first hour, and then she'll be back in the second hour. She might even slip in for Wiggins America, depending if she can get here in time, which is at 12:45. But until then, we have some great stuff for you. In fact, we have a lot of I don't want to preview everything that's coming up throughout the entire day. I'll just tell you what's going on in this show. And then we'll talk about that more in the next segment. That in this show alone, we're going to talk about Ron DeSantis with a guy who is really right in the middle of kind of the storm between Trump and DeSantis. That is Steve Cortes.
Mm-hmm.
If you know him, he does a lot of the whiteboard talks, not the Karl Rove whiteboards.
No.
But
I think he calls it chalk talk.
Chalk talk. That's it. And it's not chalk, though. It's a dry erase board. So we might have to call him on that. But he does like 60-second videos where he explains a lot of times things that involve numbers on a board. And he's become somewhat famous for it. Well, he was a Trump guy. And I can't say he's against Trump now.
No.
But he has kind of flipped his allegiance to DeSantis.
Yeah, he's a member of the Never Back Down PAC, which is a DeSantis supporting PAC.
There you go. So there's the info. And so Annie is going to be talking to him at 1:25, and right before that, Deroy Murdock, who's a weekly guest. So she'll be back here shortly. Until then, though, I've set up a debate here that's kind of strange. And Brad knows what I'm talking about. Hannah, this is going to be new to you.
Yeah, I haven't heard about this at all.
So please, with me, react as we go through this.
Are you ready to debate me, Hannah?
Here we go.
It's not. It's really not a debate between us at all. I think we probably will agree on this. But I've got a debate here that I've fake set up between Bernie Sanders and Ted Cruz, because they're both talking about the same issue. Now, they weren't talking to each other, but they were addressing the debt limit and the budget negotiations that are going on right now. Now, credit to Fox News. I'm glad when they do this kind of thing. They actually published an entire op-ed by Bernie Sanders. And I'm going to read some of that to you, but then I'm also going to pull some clips that Ted Cruz... Great stuff, because we're talking about really kind of like opposite networks here. Bernie Sanders doing Fox News and Ted Cruz doing CNBC. Now, CNBC's financial, so they're not like hard left, but they're not right either. It's not Fox Business. They're, I would say, middle ground, lean left, something like that. So Ted Cruz went on that network. And so I've got clips from that I'm going to play in response to Bernie Sanders. You guys ready for that?
Yes.
Here we go. This is Bernie. I'm quoting here. He says, "We are at a pivotal moment in American history. In the coming days, decisions will be made with respect to our federal budget and the national debt that could impact the lives of virtually every American in our country for decades to come. In my view, the debate we are having on the debt ceiling is about our national priorities. It is about what we value as a nation and whose side we are on." So far?
Yeah.
So far, I agree.
He's correct.
Yes. As usual, Bernie Sanders, a lot of times, this is very common for him, he'll lead with something, whether it's a tweet or an article or an op-ed like this, that the first couple paragraphs or sentences, you go, kind of on board with that.
He accurately describes the issue.
He usually does. He approaches an issue that everybody kind of can acknowledge, yeah, that's an issue.
So what's the twist?
Well, that's always the rub, isn't it? Is that it never stops there. He identifies an issue and goes, hey, there's an issue here. And most people, we go, yeah, we agree. There's an issue here. In fact, when he's saying that virtually every American in our country is going to be affected by this for decades to come, I don't think he's wrong. I will stop there before I get to Ted Cruz, though, and just ask you guys, do you think the debt limit and budget negotiations, outside of the people who are tuned in, I mean, tuned in right now, literally tuned in, and people who are paying attention, do you think this is cracking through as a story to the average American? Do they really care?
I would have to say no. I don't know if I'm just saying that because I'm younger, and so only certain things really, really crack through to me and my friends and people in my circle. But I don't think I would have known about this unless I'm in the thick of it like I am right now.
I think the people that rely on a paycheck from the government, rely on monies coming in from the government, that has cracked through with them.
Yes.
So maybe not necessarily Hannah's generation, but the older generation that gets Social Security, people that have government jobs, that group of people they're kind of like, okay, am I going to get my quote unquote paycheck?
Yeah.
So I think it's starting to crack through with
That's
that
a good
group.
point. And it's double-sided coin, because it's not just people receiving government benefits. It's
Right.
people who work government jobs as
Right.
well, depending on what those jobs are. So that's the way that Bernie opens his op-ed. Now, Ted Cruz responds.
I'm worried because I think the young extreme staffers in the White House have no appreciation for just how damaging a default would be. And so I think they are quite willing to force a default because they think the media will blame it on Republicans. And I think that would be wildly irresponsible.
So he's making a point there that I think we would agree with, the three of us, that Republicans usually take the brunt of the criticism for these things.
Of course.
And they usually fold because of it, because they do not control the narrative well enough. And so they kind of give in. At best, they get a tiny fraction of what they were hoping for. You know, let's say if you had to separate it out, Democrats get 80% of what they wanted, Republicans get 20% of what they wanted, and then everybody tries to spin it as a win. But we all know that the more you're spending, the more that's going to benefit Democrat priorities, because that's pretty much the only solution they have to problems.
Throw money at it.
So Bernie continues there. Now, Ted is saying in general that he agrees that this is a big issue and that the staff of the Biden White House is not treating it as such.
Yeah, they're not taking it seriously.
In his words, they're basically too young, that they don't even know what they're dealing with. They're approaching this just like any other negotiation, when in fact, this is really a negotiation. When you have two branches of Congress that are held by different parties, this is where they go eyeball to eyeball and somebody blinks.
And I don't know like what the experience in Washington is for a lot of these staffers, but if this is the first, because I mean, it's been a Democrat and Democrat controlled Senate and House and Congress. There has not been negotiations, quote unquote, that have needed to take place. It's just one says we want this, and they're like, all right, let's write something and push it through and then put it on the president's desk.
Yeah. And aside from Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema, they pretty much have been able to do whatever they want financially.
So this is probably the first time that they're actually understanding this is what negotiations look like. This is important. You actually have to give a little to get a little.
So Bernie continues here. He says, at a time of unprecedented wealth and income inequality, now we're getting into Bernie Sanders stuff, when the top 1% has never had it so good, when 3 people on top own more wealth than the bottom half of our society, do we finally demand that the billionaire class start paying their fair share of taxes? Or do we shower the wealthy and well-connected with trillions of dollars in new tax breaks? The word fair share popped up there, by the way. I don't know if you noticed that.
I hate that word.
It's not a real it's a real phrase. It just doesn't mean anything. Nobody knows what it means. It can mean anything you want. That's why they use it. At a time when corporations are making enormous profits by jacking up the price of healthcare, prescription drugs, gasoline, and groceries, do we finally end the huge loopholes that exist in our rigged tax code that allow large corporations to avoid paying their fair share of taxes? Now, this is, again, Bernie's sweet spot. He finds something that is an issue, which is that everybody's paying more for everything,
right?
And then diverts the blame from that issue onto things that benefit what he's always been saying. And in a way, there are data points that do support some of this. Like, corporations have used the excuse of inflation to jack up prices higher than inflation itself would have dictated. There is truth there. There is truth there. However, to completely ignore historic sustained inflation is so disingenuous that it has to be Bernie Sanders. Bernie continues here right before we get to Ted. He says, or do we eliminate the corporate minimum tax passed last year that prevents giant profitable corporations from paying nothing in federal income taxes after making billions in profits? All right. Ted Cruz, again, responding, not necessarily directly to Bernie, but I've pulled the quote responding to what Bernie says there.
I think it's worth pausing for a second and reflecting at how different this is from the past. So 2017, total federal spending was about $4 trillion. Total federal tax revenue was about $3.3 trillion. Now, quick math, that means we had about a $700 billion deficit. That was 2017. Fast forward to today. Total spending has gone from $4 trillion up to $6.5 trillion, $6.4 trillion. Tax revenues have exploded. Tax revenues have gone from $3.3 trillion to $4.8 trillion. Now, quick pause to note, when we signed the 2017 tax cuts that I fought very hard to pass, every Democrat went on TV and said this is going to slash federal revenues and blow up the deficit. Turns out they were entirely wrong on that. Every year, federal tax revenues have gone up, and they've gone up from $3.3 trillion to $4.8 trillion. The problem isn't tax revenues. The problem is we had a spending binge from the Democrats that has caused the national debt to go from 20 trillion rather to 32 trillion.
Ted Cruz using a lot of figures there.
Yeah.
That's real data compared to what Sanders is saying, which is just a bunch of fair share and blah, blah, blah. This is real numbers from the last 4 or 5 years.
It's really interesting what he's saying. He's saying there's not a tax income issue. It's a spending issue. But that's only if you want to cut spending. If you want to keep spending like a drunken sailor, well, then you have a tax issue. And that's kind of where we're at with this negotiation. The Democrats are saying, hey, we want to spend all of this money, so we need to get income so that we can spend this money. Republicans are saying, we don't need to be spending all that money. This is ridiculous.
Correct.
And we've made more on taxes. So if we just bring our spending levels down to match what the raise in taxes are, we could actually balance the budget.
And I don't think anybody is surprised to hear Ted Cruz talk about that we've spent more than we should have in the last few years. Starting in 2020, which is under Trump, let's say that, through Joe Biden and the last few years, we have spent a ridiculous amount of money. And that's led to inflation. I mean, that's the bottom line. Ted Cruz, what he's outlining there that needs to be focused on, though, is that the Trump tax cuts, which everybody said in the media and, might I note, the Congressional Budget Office, the CBO, which is supposed to be nonpartisan, and I think for the most part are, it doesn't mean they're gods, like they know exactly what's going to happen. But what they said in 2017 when they passed those tax cuts was that it would increase revenue because you would bring back so many companies who had offshored because the U.S. tax code was so much higher than everywhere else in the world. What he said was, we need to compete with the rest of the world to get especially American businesses back into America, let alone any other business that wants to be here. We want them to be here. Well, guess what? That's happened. American businesses are moving back. A lot of that is because of the uncertainty in the world. So it's not just the tax code, but there is a big tax incentive to move back now after those tax cuts. And it has helped. And there are more tax dollars coming into America percentage-wise than there were before. And that's in the midst of shutting down businesses all over the place in the last few years. So that is working. Back to Bernie here, he says, sadly, the Republicans have made their priorities abundantly clear throughout the budget negotiations. If Congress does not agree to impose massive cuts on the needs of working people, the elderly, the children, the sick, and the poor,
oh my goodness,
he's right in his lane, they will allow for the first time in our history the United States to default on national debt. Here's Ted Cruz talking real facts about default.
Well, here's what I think a responsible president would say. He would stand up and say, under no circumstances will we ever, ever, ever default on the debt, no matter what. The United States honors our commitments. Now, how could he do that?
He could do that by claiming the 14th Amendment and saying he's going to pay out. And I know you disagree with that.
Except that would be patently unconstitutional. But he could do it in a very simple way that is clearly legal, which is that every month federal tax revenues coming into the federal government significantly exceed interest on the debt. And he could say, we're going to pay interest on the debt. We're not going to default.
We're not going to pay everything else.
That's what's called prioritization. He could do that.
And they very, very well may get to that situation at the beginning.
They may get to that situation, but the reason that he hasn't said that, which he could say, he could take the chances of default to zero. The reason he hasn't is I think the White House is trying to scaremonger on this. They're trying to threaten to.
So it's negotiations. I mean, that's why he's saying that. Now, this is something that could be done pretty much under any president, not just Joe Biden, but that they could say, we've got enough tax revenue coming in to cover the interest. That means we're not defaulting, and the negotiation goes away.
Just listening to the back and forth on the same topic, the plea that is made, Ted Cruz just offered a real solution there. Hey, pay the interest. We got more than enough tax revenue. Let's do that. Bernie Sanders is saying, but the children and the sick and the elderly. So Bernie Sanders' approach is the emotional approach.
This doesn't surprise me at all.
But this is the whole argument between left and right.
It is.
Brad, I'm
always,
so glad you're
single
seeing
time.
that, because that is exactly why I've highlighted these two. I mean, these are two big, well-known senators that represent very different sides of Congress, different sides of the fence, and their approaches are stark. I mean, they're very, very different. Just to conclude here, now that was the last clip from Ted Cruz. So I will conclude here. Bernie's point of the whole article is to get us to use, or get the president to use, the 14th Amendment. Ted Cruz addresses that in that clip and says that's patently unconstitutional. You can't do that. Basically, again, we're talking about the party that says support democracy is saying circumvent Congress. That's the point.
That's exactly what
That's the
they're saying.
point of what is happening.
Abuse the Constitution.
Yes.
And circumvent Congress.
Yes. Use executive authority to go around something because we don't like the fact that we even have to negotiate.
Destroy democracy to save
democracy. That is the point. But I'll finish on a Bernie quote here just because it's so dishonest. It says, this action will have a devastating impact on our economy, destroy millions of jobs, and cause interest rates on mortgages and auto loans to skyrocket. The hypocrisy of Republicans in Washington is truly breathtaking. That's what he says.
Mm-hmm.
Over and over again, we hear from the Republican leadership about how deeply concerned they are about the large deficit and national debt that we have. Really? If that's the case, then why have they been pushing for the complete repeal of the estate tax, which benefits a handful of multi-billionaire families and would increase the federal deficit by $1.8 trillion? Did you catch what he said there? Well, why are Republicans against the estate tax? Do you know what that is, Hannah?
No.
That's a death tax. When you die, if you want to leave things to your kids, the government then, if they have an estate tax, steps in and says, I need a part of that. Republicans are just opposed to it because it's stupid and wrong.
Well, of course.
It's a terrible idea to tax the life's work of anyone when they're handing it off to their children that they've worked for. I digress. The last sentence here is what I wanted to end on. He says, why are they pushing for an extension of the Trump tax breaks that disproportionately benefit the wealthy and large corporations and would increase the federal deficit by $3.5 trillion?
So he's still quoting the Trump tax breaks is increasing the federal deficit.
He's still pointing to the Trump tax breaks as the problem and saying they would increase the federal deficit by $3.5 trillion. The Trump tax breaks took effect in 2017. If you're not paying attention, that's 5 years of data that you have there that Ted Cruz, literally pulled from to give you real numbers that have happened in those 5 years. Bernie says this is what will happen, projecting forward instead of using existing data to show that what he's saying isn't true and hasn't happened. He's instead projecting so that he can make up anything he wants. Because if it's the future, you can say, well, this is what we think is going to happen.
Right.
It's so disingenuous, yet it takes it took me probably an hour of sitting down, listening to these clips, putting that together, that the average person doesn't have that kind of time. So of course, Bernie gets away with saying these things. Democrats get away with these lies in the face of no pushback from who should be doing it, the media. That's literally why I'm doing it right now.
Well, and it goes back to that whole thing that I was talking about with the argument from emotion versus or argument from a fact. Arguments from facts generally provide a better case in that, but they're less persuasive in society.
They're less
because
persuasive.
It's easier to get people worked up and scared and worried about grandma than it is to like convince somebody with numbers. So they're like, hey, we're going to do that. And they're trying to take away grandma's social security.
Exactly right. It's one of the reasons that I really like that Republicans look like they're doing really a full court press in the media on this budget issue, because it is important. It feels like it's so big that it doesn't really impact anything, but it kind of affects everything. So it's very, very important to stay on top of these things. Thanks for tuning in to the Annie Frey Show. We're sans Annie Frey for the first hour, but she'll be here in the second hour. Take the show from there. This is Ryan Wiggins. That's Hannah Gibbs. That's Brad Range. And we'll be with you for this hour until Annie comes back. Thanks for listening.
You're listening to the Annie Frey Show on St. Louis's home for conservative talk. Find the podcast, on-demand audio, and more at 971talk.com/Annie.
Air Comfort Service, online at aircomfortservice.com. The HVAC company that you may not know that you need. Why do I say that? Well, because it's just not the case that you're excited about having an HVAC company come out to your house. It never really is. It usually indicates that you have a problem. Of course, we all have furnaces and air conditioners here in the St. Louis, in the bi-state region. We have hot summers and cold winters. You want to make sure that you are going to be in your comfort zone. And when you're not, it's not a happy day. Enter Air Comfort Service. They are there to provide you with what you need, the knowledge, the explanation, and the options to solve whatever problem it is you're having. They want to make sure that they are catering to your needs to get you in your comfort zone, but giving you options that can fit in your budget, that can help you with financing, that can help you with rebates. There's nobody in the business who is working as hard to get you the rebates you need to be able to afford the comfort zone that you seek out to have. Call them at 314-513-0091, 314-513-0091, aircomfortservice.com.
May is a great time for savings with Chesterfield Fence and Deck. Mark Cox here for my friends at Chesterfield Fence. You can save 20% off your next outdoor project just by mentioning that you heard me talking about Chesterfield Fence and Deck. Call them up, 636-532-4054. Have them come over and give you a free estimate. They take a lot of pride in what they do. They've been at this since 1968. This locally owned and operated for 55 years under the same ownership. If you need a new fence, they've got great wood cedar fences or low maintenance vinyl fences. They can also do aluminum, steel, and chain link. For the decks, the beautiful natural cedar decks, or even Vecadec vinyl decking, that is no maintenance and beautiful colors. Espresso, hazelnut. Go take a look. Visit their showroom down in the Chesterfield Valley. Tell them you heard Mark Cox talking about it. Again, 636-532-4054, ChesterfieldFence.com.
Do you have 3 ex-wives and your current trophy wife wants a life insurance policy 3 times the size of the policies you had to purchase for your previous mistakes? If so, you need to call Big Lou at Term Provider, 800-700-6898. Big Lou is intimately familiar with your problems, and if you're 50 or 60 years old and in reasonably good health, a $1 million policy should only cost about $100 to $200 per month. Big Lou may have a solution for your previous policies as well. You may even save enough money to lighten the load on your new $1 million policy. Remember, call Big Lou. He's like you, except he's only on number 2. Call Term Provider at 800-700-6898. That's 800-700-6898 for $1 million in term life insurance that you can live with. Call Big Lou at 800-700-6898. 800-700-6898.
Ad paid for by Abadian and Totalian. COVID-19 was tough on businesses. If you experienced a negative impact to your business during the pandemic and have at least 5 W-2 employees, then you need to pay attention. There are some new powerful incentives that have been created specifically for businesses impacted by COVID-19. One such program is the Employee Retention Credit. Its tax incentive could bring you some serious cash back to your business. Even if you received a PPP loan in 2020 or 2021, you were still permitted to receive this credit. There are many ways to be eligible, and taking advantage of this tax credit doesn't need to be complicated. We made it easy for you by doing the legwork to maximize the amount of your refund due. Call us today at 800-874-1654 and we'll set your business up to take full advantage of the Employee Retention Tax Credit. That's 800-874-1654. Again, 800-874-1654. We'll get the ball rolling on getting you and your business some much-needed relief, but time is limited to file a claim. So call 800-874-1654.
It's time for a $98 AC tune-up.
Second Amendment Radio is a staple of solid firearm information on 97.1 every weekend, Saturday from 3 to 4 and Sunday from noon to 1. It's Second Amendment Radio and the great outdoors. 97.1 FM Talk.
It's getting near dawn. When lights close the tired eyes, I'll soon be with you, my love. Give you my dawn surprise.
It's the Andy Frey Show on 97.1 FM Talk. She'll be back shortly. She's probably in her car on the way here right now, actually. I've got a bunch of material here that I prepared for Wiggins America, but Hannah is going to do Wiggins America today.
Taking it over.
Do it proud, because the name means a lot in this city. So what I've got here is a bunch of stories with one theme that I've been doing this lately, where I'll find several stories, find the theme of the story,
Okay.
and see if you can kind of follow along. The theme of
Guess
this
that theme.
is, well, I'll just tell you.
Oh.
It's time is running out is the theme of these stories. Some of them are pretty serious. Some of them are not. I'm going to start with one that's not. Although it's serious in its own way. We've all been there before. You pour a bowl of cereal and open your fridge to find the milk was Best Buy a few days ago. Or that chicken you were planning to make for dinner has a sell-by date of yesterday. Does that mean the food you're craving to eat is unsafe to consume?
I almost did Wiggins America over this.
Did you really?
Yeah.
I'm glad you didn't. This is a good one because it is right in my wheelhouse, if you didn't know.
Yeah, I know. That's why I was going to do it. That's totally Wiggins America. Expired food.
Food expiration dates, which include best if used by or before, or sell by, or use by, or freeze by, are ambiguous at best for one simple reason. They're not required by the U.S. Food and Drug Administration. So there is no safety standard. So it's basically just companies deciding what they're going to put on their package for your benefit, which I'm a fan of. I'm a fan of when that happens. I'm not a fan of whatever's happening on our stream right now, but yeah, Annie's tuning in. It's a wild camera. I can tell you that. It's a wild camera. It's all over the place. It looks like it's falling behind the steering wheel now. If you want to tune in, you can see it. There is one exception to this story. Product dating on infant formula is required by federal regulations. Otherwise, those dates printed on food are merely a guide. So my question for you guys, do you use them? Are you like me that you use them as maybe a loose suggestion?
I usually do follow best buy instructions, but there's some stuff that I don't. Like crackers. Crackers is fine for me to eat a little stale, but like milk, no. Not cool.
Yeah, I mean
milk you got to be kind of strict.
There's a little bit of grace period there for me. I even have taken medicine that I looked at after taking it as like, oh, that expired, like whatever.
That was on my list. Medicine is one of the top ones that don't really care about the expiration date, because all that I've heard is that if you take ibuprofen a year after expiration, it's just less effective.
It barely works.
It's not gonna, it's not gonna hurt you. You just got to take a little bit more.
That's what we've heard. We can't confirm that.
Yeah, I had no idea.
This is not advice from
that is what I've heard. But here's a guide. This is why I actually brought this up, because there's so many different vernacular verbiage that they use for these things. Best if used by means that when a product will be best of flavor. So you could, if it says best by this date, you could use it way past that date and still be okay. A sell by date tells the store how long it is okay to display the product for sale. A use by date is the last date recommended for the use of the product, and then you probably can get rid of it. Or a freeze by date indicates that when a product should be frozen to maintain.
I've not seen that one.
Yeah, I've never heard of that.
Oh yeah, I've seen freeze by before. Certainly.
What's it on? What kind of products?
I think meat.
Okay.
It's on meat a lot.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
So there you go. There's your guide for that.
Expiration dates with like makeup and beauty products. I never care about that. I'm like, what do you mean this hairspray is only good for 12 months? What does that mean?
It probably means it's less sticky. Or it's too sticky to come out of the bottle.
I'm going to take a guess and say that Annie does follow food expiration dates. That's my assumption there.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
She can let us know. If you're on the live stream, she might actually give us the thumbs up or down.
Thumbs up or thumbs down, Annie, if you follow food expiration dates. I'm banking that you do.
Okay, we'll let you know. The second story, again, the theme being time is running out. Listen to this one. New York City. What did she just
She
get?
does.
She
does.
did?
I knew she would.
New York City is literally sinking because it weighs too much. This is, before you think.
I mean, it makes sense.
This is a crazy story. This is from Popular Mechanics, okay? This isn't like some goofy blog or something.
This isn't like Jezebel or.
Right. According to a new study, all of New York City is under pressure due to the weight of its many massive buildings.
Yes.
It's enough pressure, in fact, that they have determined that the city is sinking. So just putting this out there, that if you ever see climate science that measures New York City and says, oh, well, the sea level was here before. Now it's here. Therefore, we must have global warming.
Are we sure that the sea level's going up?
And the city's not going down.
Not that the city's going down. What's happening here?
In the study published in Earth Future by New England-based scientists investigating sea level rise on coastal cities, The authors found that the downward pressure exerted by the built environment of New York City is causing the city to sink up to 2 millimeters per year and faster in some parts, a relatively quick sink rate compared to other cities.
I was going to say 2 millimeters is kind of fast.
Yeah, that's not. That's
so
not
how long
nothing.
before it's underwater?
They didn't say how long it would take, but that's a lot of downward pressure. There's other cities in the United States that it may not be the weight of the city that's pushing it down. I've never heard of that before. But Miami, New Orleans, these are cities that have major problems with water.
Isn't Venice sinking?
I've heard the same thing. I've heard that too.
I hope New York's kiosk are able to float then.
Yeah, it better make them floating kiosks. You ever seen 2012, the movie?
Nope.
Oh,
yep,
yeah.
that's what's going to happen by 2012. I guarantee
it's
it.
It's going to sink and then a big wave.
Yep.
Then it's all going to freeze.
Exactly. I love all this stuff. I love movies like Al Gore's Inconvenient Truth. There's several others that you can watch them now. In fact, this is on my list to do at some point to like take homework research of watching these movies that made all these predictions and just checking them off, because there's several in Inconvenient Truth that are already passed.
Oh yeah,
that didn't happen. And there's some lesser famous movies that have done the same thing that I've watched that I was like, it was 10 years ago. All right, here's another one. A storefront at the not at all ominous 666 Manhattan Avenue, speaking of New York, is using only robots to serve coffee. Not much more to it than that, but I just want to know, how much time do we have before the robots are making everything and drinking all the coffee? Would you drink coffee or get anything made by robots? Do you have any problems with that?
I probably would. I mean, huge coffee fan, and I feel like coffee. Yeah, I would.
I don't have a problem with it per se, provided the coffee's good. And like, I've even seen the machines where like you put the cup up under there and it puts the design in the in the foam and whatnot.
Annie's shaking her head no.
But
I don't think she'd eat robot food.
You wouldn't eat pellets. I have no problem. I brought it up because I figured the answer would be, I'm uncomfortable with that. I think this is great. I think this is very good, innovative market technology that in an era when you can't find workers, especially to do these kinds of jobs, or they're inconsistent. As a business owner, I'd be jumping all over this kind of stuff.
But the problem is you're going to create a complete job shortage of quote unquote unskilled labor, entry-level jobs. And then you're going to have a whole sect of people that need some sort of, that won't be able to go to work.
You know what? They've been saying that same argument for 150 years. That, once we move to automation, we won't need people to screw the toothpaste tubes on anymore. We're going to lose all those jobs. It's just that the jobs shift. And it's why different sectors grow more, like the service sector.
Yeah, but
is
where
now
does it
way
shift
bigger
to?
than it
Because I mean,
ever.
when we're looking at AI, you're looking at like AI is writing songs, for Pete's sake. It wrote a Drake rap song digitally.
Hey, look, I'm not saying
so where
that I
do they
love
go?
AI in the arts. I'm just saying that for making coffee and making pizzas, I love the idea.
Yeah, but I think, and I guess the other side of that is too, there's still going to be a market for people that are just like, you know what, I'd rather have my coffee made by a person. It's like, I'll give you an example in automobiles. Ferrari still quotes handmade, and that they put the builder's name on a plaque in the car. It's a selling point. It becomes a
it's a marketing tool.
So you get a handmade coffee instead of a assembly line produced coffee.
But I think my point is that option to me is fine.
Yeah,
I would have no problem if it was you got to pay a little bit more because it's handmade. Well, fine, I don't care. Yeah. I just like the market solutions that are happening with some of this stuff. All right, last one before we get to Wiggins America in the next segment with Hannah and probably Annie. This one is actually pretty serious. An Associated Press analysis of a dozen countries most indebted to China, including Pakistan, Kenya, Zambia, Laos, and Mongolia, found that paying back the debt is consuming an ever greater amount of the tax revenue needed to keep schools open, provide electricity, and pay for food and fuel. It's draining foreign currency reserves that these countries use to pay for interest on those loans, leaving some with just months before their money is gone.
The old Belt and Road program. You guys, you know about that, right?
Explain.
So this is the program where China has been going into these countries, like the countries that he's mentioned, and building roads and all this other stuff. But you not for free.
It's strings attached.
There are strings attached, and now those bills, those checks are coming due, and they're basically draining the resources from these countries.
And what's crazy about it, that's kind of now there's one story happening here that's kind of the surface level, is that all these poorer nations that are indebted to China, they're close to default, and you're talking about massive civil upheaval in a lot of nations, maybe all at the same time. That's an unreported story.
Very curious to see what the mineral resources are of those countries
That's
and
a
how
very
much
good
of those
question.
mineral resources are something that China needs that China doesn't have, because China will come in and be like, well, we'll tell you what, we'll wipe out this debt if you give us control over your cobalt mines, if you give us control over your lithium mines.
That's a very smart question. They're not doing that, though.
Not yet.
The story here is that they're calling in debts. And they, because they're concerned with the global economic climate, that all these poorer nations, they're not just in debt to China. They're in debt to a lot of places. China is just one of the major ones. US too, Japan. They're in debt to a lot of countries. If China starts calling in the debt of all these countries, which it looks like it is right now, you're going to see some default on a major level among a lot of poorer nations. Well, that is going to have a cascade effect on a larger economy. And you're talking about some pretty serious stuff that's going on. Here's how it's playing out real quick before we get to the break. How this is playing out in Zambia, for instance, a landlocked country, about 20 million people, is that in Southern Africa, the past 2 decades, they've borrowed billions of dollars from Chinese state-owned banks to build dams, railways, and roads. Stuff that's infrastructure seems completely fine, except that you don't want to go into debt with China. The loans boosted Zambia's economy, but also raised foreign interest payments so high that there was little left for the government, forcing it to cut spending on other things like healthcare, social services, and subsidies to farmers needed to make food. Here's why it's a problem, not just that they're going into debt, which is a problem, but that they're doing it with China. China doesn't play by the rules of everybody else. So if they're in debt to the US and Japan and France and whoever else, usually the return payments go out pretty evenly. China says, no, you can't tell anybody else about what you owe us, and you have to pay us back first. So normally a lender says, hey, you know what? I'm actually going to work with you so that I can get my money back. Well, all the countries down the stream from China are going, hey, wait a minute. What kind of business do you have with China? Oh, you won't tell us because China's forcing your hand to not tell anybody. So it's got all these implications for the way this is going to go. And I really need to wrap this segment up as fast as possible. I can't. Here's what I'm going to do. I think I'm just going to filibuster right through the commercial break. She's standing. Go ahead. Here.
No, you're doing a great job.
I agree.
I disagree with most of your points.
Annie is here. We're wrapping up. This is the Annie Frey Show. I get to say that once in a while with